Greetings, I'm David Garrigues. Welcome to the Asana Kitchen podcast. Before we get started, just want to mention to you these upcoming events that I have. 7 weeks in Kovalam, starting January 13th to March 1st. It's a MYSORE intensive plus extra classes. Would love to work with any of you in India. And then also I have a retreat the second week of March at a hot springs, off-the-grid hot springs in the forest of Oregon. Also love to work with you. So also you can subscribe to this podcast on my YouTube channel or through iTunes. I'm recording this on November 22nd, Thanksgiving, and just wanted to, even though you'll be seeing this a bit later, I do want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving and just say how thankful I am for all of you and the fact that we share yoga together. That's the light of my life, and I'm just thankful. So for this episode of the podcast, I'm going to discuss the evolution of practice, and using these kind of 4 stages of life in Hindu, which are the kind of student phase, they call it brahmacharya, the householder phase, the forest, retreating to the forest stage, and then the renunciate stage. I want to think of it in 2 different ways. One is that there are kind of 4 grand stages, like that they really do correspond to like your age. So when you're a teenager and you're in school, you're in that first stage. And then you get married, you get saddled with work, and you're a householder. And then your kids grow up and things happen and you begin, another process happens where kind of naturally introspection starts to enter into your world, like an inner life. You start to wonder about yourself. And that's what this kind of withdrawing into the forest, and withdrawing from worldly life, kind of getting a more spiritual dimension to your life. And then the last phase where you, like renunciation, where you become an ascetic. You really give up the material. You make ready physically, energetically, psychically to leave the material world. And so it's like a deeper stage of the forest dwelling. So that's the first way to see this, as just 4 chronological life stages. But you can also be more playful and creative with it. They're more like psychic places, and we go through many cycles of them repeatedly. In the brahmacharya phase, the practice, so that the word brahmacharya, it's one of the niyamas, and it's celibacy. Okay, and so the word in this context is like the unmarried student, or so the student that a young person or a person that their station in life, it's kind of like equivalent to the Native American vision questing. It's like your energy is available for tapas, for practice, and so you don't have you're not married, so you don't have a partner, you don't have children. Maybe you haven't even decided on a career. And so all of your energy, most of your energy can get funneled into practice. So it's an amazing time of practice. And it's time for like self-development. And then the ASHTANGA practice is perfect for this student phase because it gives you this very substantial discipline, a whole method for getting into hatha yoga. And and it's very structured. So the kind of flighty, youthful exuberance, and you can be given to distraction and really open to the world, and so this practice, so Ashtanga gives you somewhere to put all that energy, and so you take to it, and there's a zealousness or like a following of ideals, and so when you yoke yourself to Ashtanga, then you're doing it 6 days a week, and you're following the sequences and doing all the postures and really getting into the struggle, and all that's happening. And then you're also potentially part of a community of learners, others that are also doing the same thing. And so you devote a period of your life to intense tapas and study. Your practice reflects these 4 stages, or there's a corresponding play out in your practice, or development or evolution of your practice. And at first, Ashtanga offers you this amazing template, this method as a student. So to grab onto you, and it's such a structured recipe that helps you to gain amazing skill and knowledge, because you eliminate doubt, hesitation, uncertainty, and just confusion. So you could also say that in this phase, your life supports your practice. Okay, so everything is organized around practice. Your sleeping habits, your eating habits, your relationships, even your work. Right? So the practice is first, and it's this phase. And then when you go to the householder, an exact inversion happens. Okay, so when you get a family and work responsibilities and such, then your practice supports your life, not your life supporting your practice. Why I like these stages is because there's changes happen within that. You can't remain like the young 17-year-old student forever. Okay, and so this next phase happens for most of us, right? That we get married, we start families and careers, and so many responsibilities come. And so then your practice has to adjust. You have to adjust your practice for that. And you have to make room for these other responsibilities. As a householder, then your practice isn't going to look the same. You're going to have to modify it and adapt it. You're going to have to shorten it. You're going to have to get creative about doing different things. So suppose you have 45 minutes per day. Then the only way to meet your practice is not just to do as much of your series as you can in 45 minutes and then stop every day. Because if you do that, then you're going to miss out on so many other aspects of the practice, like your inversions, or maybe backbends from second series, right? So there's this inevitable need to customize and personalize, and to get creative about skipping postures or emphasizing certain themes on certain days, and making sure that you nourish yourself during this different phase, and that you're able to transition, to adapt, and not be stuck in a rigid idea about practice, but allow your practice to reflect the circumstances that you are with now. So it's the transitions that you have to be particularly careful with, because if you're stuck on the idea of what you had as a practice before you had a lot of responsibilities, then you might quit because you can't do that anymore. Or it might become very stale because you just keep doing the same thing over and over with the limited time that you have. And this is why I'm saying, though, that you have to kind of make ready for these evolutions. You have to make room for them and anticipate them. And there can be frustration trying to practice as a householder. I mean, I think it's a big thing for people and so there is a tendency to make it all or nothing. Either I have all the time I want, all the freedom I want to practice, or I don't practice at all. Okay, and I'm saying you don't want that, right? That practicing some is far better than practicing none. And even from the perspective of that, keeping in mind that the householder phase doesn't last forever, right? That eventually you're going to be able to circle back around and put more energy into your practice. And that's what this forest retreat phase signifies, is now I'm getting back control, and I can work more deeply on myself and on my practice. So for me, it's interesting because I'm in the householder phase, but certainly I'm in a transition. I'm transitioning towards that forest dwellers stage, both in a kind of age way, but also psychically. It's interesting how if you really follow your kind of inner life, that there's a naturalness to these phases, and in fact, you'll naturally transition to them if you stay in touch with yourself and you allow yourself to adapt as the conditions change and new conditions present themselves. But and as a householder, I have less, in a way, less binding me to the world than many, because I don't have children, and but at the same time, teaching yoga is a huge householder responsibility for me that has deeply influenced my practice and limited my practice. And so I'm no stranger to having to compromise, basically, having to accept lower standards that are lower than desirable for my own personal practice, because I'm giving more to the world and to my householder duties. So I will say, though, that I've made the most out of making do. So in my very first Asana Kitchen cooking video, I had, it was called the Ghetto Kitchen. I don't know if you've seen it, but I came up spontaneously with the motto, because the kitchen was all just torn apart, right? It was so bad. And so I said, making do is what we do, right? And to a certain degree, that's the motto of the householder when you practice, is you make do, that's what you do. But you get into the spirit of making do, right? And you have fun with it. And there's a great Rumi poem about how he talks about how he used to be so serious and stone-faced about practice, and now he has kids running and ducking down between his legs and sticking their tongue out at him when he's practicing, and how he loves that, right? And there's a way to celebrate and to get the most out of every phase. And one of the cool things about the householder phase of practice that I think is that they're so complementary. We often emphasize how antagonistic spirituality is from materiality, right? That attachments and ego and all these worldly things that we get into are so harmful. They cause so much suffering, and they don't lead you down a spiritual track. But on the other hand, they can. How much you love your children, how much you love your job, how much you love your partners and your families, That's true beauty. That's truly what makes life worth living. And to allow that love and that passion that you have for your worldly life to enter into your practice, to be part of your practice, and for your practice to support that. This is an amazing thing, is not to see those two as coming together and helping each other. There's a very beautiful statement when I go to Louisville, Kentucky to teach. I just was there last weekend, and it's the home of Muhammad Ali. And his presence is everywhere in that city. And it's even in the yoga studio. And there's a picture of him in one area. And it says that your service to the world is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. You know, and so you being a householder, that's partly what's going on. This is your time to give to the world and to use your practice as a strengthener. That you, by practicing, you're stronger. You have more to give, more to offer. So celebrate that and do the best you can to make do with what is there, even though it's probably a lower standard than you desire. So the last thing about the householder practice is just kind of keeping in mind the difference between how your practice looks as a student, or like what you do on the mat every day as a student in the student phase versus the householder phase. And open it up. Let your practice breathe. So just let go of any strictness or rigidity about the series. Like benefit from all of that knowledge, but don't be bound by it. Like, there's so many different ways you can do a shorter practice that besides just going through your series for as long as, right, just for the however amount of time you have. So you could do some of the standing poses, or make a selection of asanas of the first series, or do the back bends of second series, or do Surya Namaskara in inversions. Or there's so many ways that you can open it up and make sure that you kind of, throughout the week, you represent all the different important categories of the Hatha yoga practice. Okay, and so then this other phase, though, this next phase that many of us are headed towards. We're either dipping our toe in or halfway there or really getting there. And I love the image of it, that they call it the forest dweller phase, right? So you have more time for practice, or you make more time for practice. And you want to do that, and the stars align, and your choices align so that you begin to make room for that more. And then there's also your practice itself evolves again. Okay, so it's funny, it's not just that I was a householder and now I'm in the forest, so I'm back to what I did as a brahmacharya, as a student. I'm not back to doing my third series, exactly posture for posture, or whatever that was, right? So, because now there's a whole nother quality. There's like introspection has happened, and life has happened, and pain, and all kinds of trial and error, choices you've made, and successes and failures, and so much material or food for thought, food for reflection, and for self-knowledge, and for wanting self-knowledge, wanting to know yourself, and to know the depths of you, and the the sacred aspects of you and the mysterious parts of you. Like this happens. And so you don't practice in the same way. You're physically, energetically, psychically, it's all new. It's all different. And if you're ready for that transition, if you are embracing change and looking for what can evolve and what is evolving and what is there for me to discover, then this can be so fruitful, so bountiful, and so fulfilling. Hopefully you've been preparing for this. All that practice, all those months and years that you've logged in, you benefit from those years, from those practices now. And it's okay if you started more recently. Like these phases, there's flexibility. And so don't worry, if you're newer to practice, you can do an accelerated version, or you did other things during that phase, and so there's no problem. But if you have been practicing, I want to give you incentive to practice as a student, as a householder, and to remind you that there's a cumulative thing that happens, a knowledge that ripens, that is amazing, and that you can't imagine. And those 10 minutes, those 20 minutes that you put in when you don't have time, they make a difference later, okay? And because these skills, the basic Hatha yoga skills, the extent of mastery is large, right? That there's a lot to explore and discover with Uddiyana Bandha, with Ujjayi breathing, with so many of these just things that we somewhat take for granted, okay? But when you reach the phase like the forest dweller, Uddiyana Bandha becomes something entirely different to you. Something, what you can extract from it, the experience and the consciousness and the kind of meditative awareness is more. And you refine that. Self-knowledge, you could say it's a layering or an unlayering, like that happens. And the practice techniques, they reveal the layers to you, or they help you go through the unlayering process. You come to know this entity, both the individual entity, these bones, these very lungs, right? This very thought process, and this person that reacts with these emotions. And then also, though, this more universal, this other impersonal consciousness that is housed in here, or that this is the vehicle for. Okay, so there's a whole kind of transformative relationship to self that happens and that yoga practice is leading you to. And the perspective that you have as a student, as a householder, and then as a forest dweller, they are radically different and evolutionary. And I would say, though, that what you like, and like your sense of what captures you, what gets you absorbed, you take more control of your practice because you know those things better in this phase. So the whole idea of samadhi as absorption or becoming enraptured and knowing unity, knowing a kind of spiritual dimension through your concentration, through your ability to sustain internal awareness, this matures and comes to the forward. The last phase, I'm not entirely qualified to speak about yet. And it's a very ambitious phase that I love about the Hindu system, right? That Because we tend to think of, in a mundane sense or in a worldly sense, that you do your work till you're 65 or whatever, and you retire and you go to Florida and kick back, right? And you enjoy you've invested in your retirement, so you have a comfortable life. And here, this system is saying that the end is the hardest thing you'll do, that you'll kind of withdraw and renounce all those comforts and try to get to the spiritual essence of your life and of life itself. And in that way too, your dharma or your sacred duty, that somehow it didn't end when you were a householder. It didn't end when you were a forest dweller. And even as a renunciant, it doesn't necessarily end because if you're a renunciant, then it's really that you're renouncing living your life for yourself, for your own personal gain, right? Because you understand the unity of all existence, and that's who you are, that you're this eternal presence that does unify everything. So that requires very deep stillness, very deep internal, sustained internal consciousness, right? But it also then takes this selfless quality. And it's something, I feel that it's a wonderful objective to lead you towards the end of your life. Like, what an amazing thought about how am I exiting? What is my life building to, right? And it's quite a challenge. It's like it keeps you very alive and very working, right? There's no kind of rest in a way, that there's a spiritual burden or this work you have to do, and this growth and evolution that you're going to keep evolving all the way till the day you die. And you're going to prepare to be ready for your death. And that the last, whatever, if you're 80 or 90 or 96, that all of those years they're key to spiritual development and to a life of practicing yoga. So remember, you can use this very fluidly and creatively, not rigidly. They might have a physical play out or phases of life in years and whatnot, but they're more like psychic places and cycles of creation. There's so many different ways that can play out. So there could be many phases of all four of these that are going on continually, and you could even embrace them all at the same time. Yeah, right. Or you could draw on the strengths of being a student, or the strengths of being a householder, or the strength of the distant idea of renunciation. And certainly, as you gain experience and practice, you can take each technique, like vinyasa or working with mudras, and think of them in terms of those phases. And they'll be very different depending on how you think of them. And also, yeah, what you'll extract out of like doing an asana or doing like shoulder stand, say. It's very different, shoulder stand as a student versus shoulder stand as a renunciant, right? Versus shoulder stand as a forest dweller and as a householder. And it just helps you to give you more choices about what to do or how to use your practice. And then it also helps you to make sense of what you're feeling about your practice. Like why you might have urges to do certain things or not do other things. And ways of encountering your frustrations and ways to make sense of why you're frustrated and also what you might do in response to being frustrated. I'm aware of these 4 stages and the way I teach, I size you up and I see where you're at. So I do my best to tailor my instructions to you based on the phase or phases that where you are. And I try to present my Asana Kitchen videos and all the different offerings to represent all of those phases. I encourage you to be to get inspired by the evolution of your practice, right? And to make room for evolution, to celebrate these different phases, and to kind of grab hold of these 4 concepts to help you along your path. So anyway, I hope this helps you. And in closing, I'd like to remind you that upcoming, I have 7 weeks of teaching in Kovalam in southern India. I would love to share the practice with you. It's from January 13th to March 1st. And then I have a retreat in the hot springs in Oregon in the 2nd week of March. So come see me. I would love to work with you. And thank you. Namaste.